Okay, and we are live. Hey everyone, Joe here with episode, I think, what did we say, 97 of the Upper Memory Block podcast. I'm back and I'm better than ever. Hooray! We are here with our 6th Patreon Hangout because me doing a real show is still too much work. Ha ha ha, that's not true. But, you know, we were supposed to originally have this Hangout. It was scheduled. Everyone had said yes, blah, 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 back on like October 10th or something. And hey, on October 4th, I unexpectedly had a baby 3.5 weeks early, or my wife did. I didn't have a baby. That would be weird. So this time around,
challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a movie about that, wasn't there, with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Junior.
It sucked.
It was bad. It was not a good movie. But yeah, so this time we're doing kind of the big overhanging topic that everyone kept wanting us to do, and I always kept saying no. And so we're going to talk about game music, game sound, sound hardware, anything that we have to say about sound. And we may play some audio if that still works and if YouTube doesn't block us. But let's get to it. We got a pretty big crew this time. So I'll start from the left on my little grid down here. So we can start with introductions from a good friend and inaugural guest podcast host, Emery Adakago.
Hi, I'm here again for some reason.
For some reason. We love having you here. Next up, we've got Brian.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Hey, glad to be here. Oh, sorry. No, Brian, not Ryan.
Sorry, Brian.
That's hilarious. Sorry.
There's two Brians.
No.
So you're Ryan, is that right?
Yeah, no B.
Okay.
Not a Y, not an I.
When I had
There
a
you
friend,
go.
a Ryan friend and not a Ryan, they did the joke of they called me B Ryan.
There you go.
Please don't do that.
B-Rye.
This won't be the
to-
last time I probably interrupt when you are trying to talk to Brian.
We all need to enunciate. B. Ryan. Next up, we have
Be the
Craig.
Ryan.
Next up, we've got Craig. Say hello, Craig.
Hello, Craig.
And next, new contributor, and I'm a big personal fan of his, Mr. Jim.
Oh, howdy. I
Mr.
like to
Moby.
do things with old games and old computers.
Yes, Mr. Moby Gamer himself.
That's me.
All right. Next up, we have a picture of me wearing a bike helmet, so we'll skip that because I already said hi. And next up, we have Ryan.
I said hi. I'll say it again. Hello.
Hey, what's up, Brian?
And finally, our pal Tomer, who may be less drunk than usual because Trolls couldn't make it this time.
Yeah, there will be no good-natured goading and swear jars this time around. I don't know. I'm trying to feel disappointed, but in reality, it probably means a better show. So,
Or a smoother show.
At the very
yeah.
least.
Lower, PG rating show.
It's all good. These are, I know it's like afternoon for me, but these are sort of the after dark UMBs, even though it's the middle of the day. So I guess we should get right into it. I know everyone probably has a lot of stuff to talk about. So I don't know if we want to structure it in any particular way, or do we just want to start talking about, some favorite game music that we've all got or anything like that? Who wants to go first?
Well, I wanted to start with talking about the PC speaker.
Okay, well, I think that sounds perfectly reasonable.
Sounds perfectly reasonable. See what you did there.
Haha.
Number one.
Oh.
I spoke about this in our earlier hangouts that the poor quality PC speaker is why I upgraded my sound card before I upgraded my video card, because I for some reason could deal with low quality video. I'd play the Atari 2600 and stuff. I was used to that, but the speaker sound was just so absolutely awful on most games that I just couldn't stand it. But I don't know, does anybody know much about the hardware of the PC speaker?
Not at
I
all.
do.
Not at all.
Let's say I know,
Yeah,
I know a little bit about it, but if somebody knows more, they can talk
Go,
about
Jim.
it.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
so
I know quite a lot about it. Tomer, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
no, I was just gonna say that normally I'm the one kind of representing the hardware / software engineering portion of the crowd. So I'm like the stickler to technical details and such. When it comes to sound hardware and the PC speaker specifically, there's probably maybe a couple people in the world who are more knowledgeable than Jim is. So,
Now you're putting me on
Definitely.
the spot, and I can't make a
yes.
mistake.
Impress
Well,
us,
you're
Jim.
allowed-
Impress us.
No. You're allowed to make mistakes. Just
All right.
not big ones.
Under pressure.
No
But we
pressure.
won't promise not to laugh if you get things wrong.
Oh, you laugh all you want. All right, so the PC speaker. The speaker in the PC is pretty much no different than that in any other system that has no sound chip like a Spectrum, except that you can pulse it on or off. What makes the PC speaker a tiny amount more controllable is that it is tied to the 8253 timer chip in the PC. So the timer chip counts, and then once it reaches the end of its count, it can do something. So the typical way when you hear like a beep is that it counts down at twice the rate you gave it, and then a line goes high, which pulses the speaker, and then it counts down again, and then the line goes low and pulses it again. So this pulses here's my real-time graph here. We'll pulse it high, then low, then high, then low. And so you get a square wave out of it. What I enjoyed is when people tried to do things other than just the square wave. So there's a second interface to the speaker, which is you can manually bit bang a port and pulse it on or off, under software control. And that was used for some multi-channel engines. I don't know if you've ever played with Music Construction Set with PC speaker output, or if you've ever done, there are some games that have multi-channel music engines in the beginning, like actually made some notes here prepared.
I was actually thinking of Access Software's games that had real sound.
Well, I was getting to that actually. That's the third mode that you can do. So the third mode
I thought that was part of that. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. The third thing you can do on the PC with the speaker is you can the timer can count down a very small amount, and then so you can give it very small values. So you can pulse it just a little and then off, and then a little and off again. And if you do that at the rate that you're outputting your digitized sample, that's a method of sound generation called pulse width modulation, or PWM. And that is what Real Sound used. In fact, well, I won't pull up a diagram right now because I'm on a roll, but the Real Sound was the one that popularized that technique. They did a few things that made it sound a little bit better compared to other games. There were actually many games before Access that used digitized sound through the speaker. You can, I think the earliest using PWM was something like Crazy Cars. Anyone remember Crazy Cars or Whizball?
By name.
Yeah, but I think Barbarian was probably even earlier.
Well, Barbarian was around the same time, but it used bit banging, and it which is pretty much like a 1-bit speech-only method. So it's really loud, but it's also very distorted. So that's why you only used it with speech. But
Actually, I have a question.
Barbarian, that goes back all the way to the dawn of IBM PC gaming. There were 2 early games that used bit banging speech, and this was even before Wolfenstein on the PC. I'm thinking of Dunzin, Warriors of Raz, if that no one probably knows what that is, and another one is Zorian Siege, spelled C-Z-O-R-I. I think that's right. Yeah, C-Z-O-R-I-N Siege.
Those must have been way before my time.
Well, unfortunately, they're not before my time, so that dates me, unfortunately. But yeah, those were 1982, and Wolfenstein for the PC came out in 83. So
yeah, but I was just saying, sorry to interrupt again.
It's all right.
But I had a question. You mentioned those 3 different methods of sound generation. What exactly is the difference between the second and the third you mentioned?
In the second, where you have a port where you can manually toggle the control, then it's completely up to the CPU. So you can, I don't know how far back to go. So for example, if you wanted to generate multi-tone output like a music engine, the CPU can go into a tight loop where it's calculating the frequencies of notes and then mixing that together and toggling the speaker manually. So it's a difference between the CPU code doing all of the manual turn on, turn off signals, or the third method for digitized speech. All the CPU does is let's say you want to play a 9,000 hertz sample, 9,000 times a second, all it does is send a byte to the timer. And it's the timer's responsibility to pulse it with the exact value that you gave it. So it's like a mixture of timer and software control. And it's that mixture that makes real sound games, when they play a sound on a really slow machine, like this guy over here, the whole machine locks up because there's not enough time to do anything else. But on faster systems like 286s and 386s, that's how real sound was able to play in the background. Those CPUs are faster, and they can send the bytes to the timer and also do other stuff. Hopefully that answered your question.
Have you ever heard of Will Harvey's music construction set by EA?
Yes, I have. In fact, I had a hand in cracking it and releasing it.
Wow. I remember, I think it was at a friend's house where they were playing with it, and I think maybe we had 286s or something, and I couldn't, you know, this is, again, I was talking about how much I hated PC speaker sound, and I was very confused about how come, you know, EA's put out something that can make great sound, but the EA games at the time had horrible sound. And I guess it's to have that 8088 compatibility still, maybe, like you talked about, or?
I don't know if it's compatibility. I think that everybody had nobody was sharing information. There was no internet in the 80s. I mean, there was, but people weren't using it for, you know, sharing. We have very much an information sharing culture in 2010 and later, and that didn't exist in the 80s. So everybody was quite literally doing their own thing. I did a little bit of research on real sound for an article that has not yet been published. And real sound was somewhat famous for a second reason. Access patented the technique that they were using to output digitized sound through the speaker, and they actually sued other companies that were doing the same thing. So there's one guy I talked with, Bill Volk, who had a hand. He was a producer over at Activision. He had a hand in creating porting Manhole over to DOS. This was a Cyan game before they did Myst.
Yeah, kind of like their proto game. Their
proto Myst, exactly, proto Myst. And Bill Volk intentionally created a completely different way of outputting digitized sound through the speaker to stick it to Access so that they couldn't sue him. So I researched real sound and found that there were a lot of different. The point of this is that there were at least 12 games that also did sound exactly the way Access did, but they did it earlier. But they all have slightly different software constructions, like they were all trying to figure it out. One of them used frequencies that cause your head to shake apart because they're so low you can hear the carrier wave when you use pulse width modulation. Other time they used very tight software loops, and they didn't use the timer at all. So nobody used the same method. And as far as I know, even though Music Construction Set was produced by Electronic Arts didn't make that engine available as like a module you could buy or plug into other games or anything like that. So it really was up to everybody. Some games ported over from the Spectrum ported over their Spectrum music engine code. So if you play a game like Saboteur 2 or Fantastic Dizzy, and those output their title music through the speaker, and it sounds identical to the ZX Spectrum because it is in fact the same code.
I don't actually recall Saboteur 2 having any music.
I can set up my fancy mixer and play some for you if you like.
Yeah, it's probably on YouTube. No need to. Not for that particular game anyway. I love it.
It would probably make your ears bleed. I mean, it's technically impressive to me, and I can appreciate the coding behind it. It doesn't sound that great. So
yeah, it's worth noting that one of the takeaways from Jim's kind of extensive technical overview of the whole thing is that you get a lot of different games or demos or whatever that use the PC speaker, and almost every single one of them sounds like completely different, whether it uses polyphonic sounds or like PWM samples or anything of the sort. It's just they sound very different. You have like Mach 3 is one of the canonical examples of
oh yeah, I was thinking of that earlier. That thing sounded amazing back then.
Yeah, there was also from the same company another game called Disc, which was sort of loosely inspired, very inspired by Tron, but loosely based on Tron.
Both made by Laurie Seals, French company.
Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce that.
You're forgetting probably the best one.
Laurie Seals, one of the two. I don't know.
Which one?
Space Racer.
Oh yeah, it had the best music, but in my opinion, the shittiest gameplay of the bunch.
Well, correct. But when you have no sound card and you're judging partially what game you should play based on how good it sounds, sometimes that bubbles to the top.
There is that. So in that vein, my favorite PC speaker game, which I think I introduced to Jim maybe 20 years ago, actually doesn't use any of those techniques. It's just a straightforward kind of slightly more than interesting beeps out of the PC speaker, and that's a game called Savage. Now the thing about that is there's versions of Savage for pretty much every platform on Earth, and for some reason it's the Amiga version that tends to be most famous for its music, even though the music on that one I feel kind of sucks. The PC version has like a completely separate PC-only soundtrack that doesn't sound anything like anything else on Earth, pretty much.
Yeah, because I'm seeing a lot of C64.
There's a C64 version. There's Amiga. I think it's on the CPC as well. There's like a bazillion versions. Yeah, and they all sound different, but all are kind of closely modeled after the Amiga version, with the exception of the, in my opinion, vastly superior PC version. Because it had great music, it really did.
Yeah, that's uncommon to hear anything like that.
So is it this guy? Let's see if this comes across. You should hear it in a second.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not bad. Oh, yeah, this is just gameplay. It's not the actual music.
No, actually, this is actually gameplay music. You get that in game.
This is pretty good.
Yeah, for the time, considering. Like,
cool.
There's an actual tune.
There were some games out there back then with the kind of boopy PC speaker music that, you know, they might have been loud, but they weren't half bad to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah, arpeggiating between 2 or 3 simulated channels, for example.
Oh, yeah, what he said.
No, that's exactly what you just heard. Kind of the very quick alternations between notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got that a lot. You actually got that a lot.
Here's Mach 3 because I like this one too. So we'll just
oh yeah,
in a second.
Great.
Get ready for Mach 3.
Nice.
I'm air guitaring right now.
Head back.
I guess it's a good thing you don't have a camera then. we might have been forced to make fun of you.
It's all good. All right, yeah, that's a nice
You can
one.
still make fun of me if you want. I don't care. IDGAF.
We make fun of you all the time. We just don't let you know.
There you go.
I'm used to it.
So I think I mentioned this on either an earlier Hangout or possibly on Square Waves. The first, I think, example of good PC speaker sound that I've run into is actually a demo scene production from a group called the Sorcerers, which is called Atom, as an ATOM, which used a digitized sample from a very kind of well-known pop song of the time. Jim, do you know the one? Like,
I don't. I can fire it up in DOSBox if people are curious to see and hear it.
That'd be cool.
All right, I will work on that.
All right.
Okay, yeah, so it's like a text mode demo. There's letters across the screen and all sorts of...
yeah, I think someone may have noticed, mentioned this on a previous Hangout, actually.
No, probably.
The thing that goes forever and ever.
Yes, that's
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did mention it on a previous Hangout. So I'm finding A Slow Tornado in Strawberry Fields. I don't know if that's the one. This might be a different one.
I have no idea.
Pardon my
this is
That's the first I've ever run into kind of, hey, this thing can, make sound that does not blow my head off.
Doesn't sound like bleeps and farts and...
Yeah. So, while Jim is setting that up, any other kind of examples of good PC speaker usage?
Well, my examples are terrible use.
Not necessarily good, but I have a nostalgic one: the License to Kill game for DOS, based on the James Bond movie.
Okay.
I don't even think I knew that existed.
Which did have a variation on the Bond theme right at the beginning. I was actually looking up a video just now. The entire theme doesn't really play in this one, but you can hear at least a snippet of it, get an impression of what it sounds like. Posted it in the chat right now. I don't know if Joe can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Joe, you want to put that on?
I will, sir.
Thank you.
I'm juggling between like 3 different browser windows. There we go. You have a joystick? Yes or no? There we go. I mean, that sort of sounds like the Bond theme, I guess.
It's twice as fast. Maybe I should play that on the.
Yeah,
system
it does. It does have kind of a nice beat to it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's another game that came out on a whole slew of home computer systems at the time, and the DOS version was kind of one of the worst ones. But you know, that's the one I played, so it is nostalgic for me.
It's actually a pretty cool sound for a PC speaker, you know, back in the day.
And
let's face it, it's the shit thing, right? It can't. You have to push it beyond its, beyond its limitations to get anything even remotely reasonable out of a PC speaker.
Exactly. But
I said it's like the PC speaker is like HTML. Like it's this thing that was meant to do one thing, like make a beep when you did something, basically. And we made it do a million other things that it was never designed to do, which is super cool.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I've got Adam ready if you want me to fire it up.
Yeah, give it a go.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. When I play this, I can't, to avoid massive echo, I'm actually going to shut down you guys, so I won't be able to hear you. But I promise I won't let it run for more than 30 seconds.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here goes. Hopefully this is coming through.
Yes, it is. You can
it
hear
is
it
loud and clear. Yeah.
So, as you can tell,
I looked it up after the fact. The one Hangout that was mentioned.
So as you can tell, it sounds like
pretty
crap,
neat.
but it was amazing for its time because, you know,
How about them apples?
it couldn't do that.
So what?
Now we're going to go.
Did it come through okay?
Yeah, it came through.
Cool.
Who's got the echo?
I think that might have been Jim because he had to do.
Okay, I think we're good now.
Get the sound to come through.
Yeah, but it's gone now. But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's crazy, right? Because that sounded like fine. It was low fidelity, but it was a sample. Like that was digital audio, effectively.
Well, it also helps that it came through DOSBox, so it doesn't sound entirely like how it would coming out of an actual PC speaker.
Well, on PC speaker, you couldn't even turn down the volume. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you could if you hacked a rheostat into it. You could add in a volume knob.
I hacked duct tape over it.
That'll work too.
Or just unplugged it.
It didn't make it. Well, I wanted to at least know when it was trying to beep at me, but so while I've got the floor here, my experiences were with id games, and they didn't put any of this effort that you guys are talking about. You guys are showing like examples of tricks and all this stuff to make it better. And my understanding with id was that as far as PC speaker went, they, even for Commander Keen, didn't bother doing anything besides some blips and bloops because they said it just took up too much of their the resources of the computer.
Isn't a sound guy.
Yeah. Plus, they had to rework basically everything they do for Sound Blaster or AdLib or whatever. You have to redo it from the ground up for PC speakers, so that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, so all my game experience was just literally just some bleeps and bloops. While you guys were playing all your fancy stuff, I'm like, am I remembering this wrong? So I pulled up, the Wolfenstein 3D with PC speaker sounds, and yeah, it's just a bleep here, a bloop there.
Yeah,
they didn't have soundtrack on PC speaker. There was no Bobby Prince stuff.
No, just the sound effects. I remember they even had PC speaker sound effects in Doom of all things.
Yeah,
as late as that.
Yeah.
So, did anybody have an experience with Tandy 1000?
I didn't.
Sorry, what game?
Yeah.
Well, the system, the computer. I got a buddy who had a Tandy 1000, and his sound was good.
Before you switch to Tandy, just one more thing about the PC speaker to kind of close it off. I think I would be remiss if I hadn't mentioned, and Jim probably didn't because he's embarrassed to have been part of that production. Impressive though it may be, that what was it, 2 years ago, a British guy called Andrew Janot, in conjunction with Jim and a bunch of other very talented people, managed to actually get a 4-channel Amiga module player up and running through the PC speaker on an actual IBM PC.
Nice.
So there's a whole write-up about that, and like I don't know if I got the point across of how monumentally impressive, like from a technical standpoint, that is. But yeah, the PC speaker has been pushed even further out of its bounds.
I remember some old mod players we had back in the day for DOS actually had PC speaker sound as well, but I reckon this is even more advanced then.
No, it's this runs on like a proper IBM PC, and those ones that you mentioned, and there's quite a slew of them. Galaxy Player, Inertia Player had the PC speaker support, and a bunch of games as well supported that, but they all required at the very least 286.
Like that.
Yeah, the module player in 88 miles per hour it uses 99.9% of the system's resources. When it plays, there are some credits that scroll up, and that's because that's all the time we had left. Out of 1 full second out of 1 frame of playing a mod, there are 50 cycles left over. So you can put a character on the screen, and so that's why the characters go like this very slowly, and then occasionally it scrolls. So that's maximizing the system.
Yeah, so you literally like used every ounce of juice that thing had.
It was crying uncle when we were finished.
I was kind of surprised that your PC didn't melt when you played the thing at the party. But
old systems don't have heat sinks.
Yeah,
their heatsink is the world.
This is going to go off topic a little bit. Can you guys can hear me, right?
Yep,
perfectly.
Of course we can.
This is jumping way ahead to sound cards, but when I was doing testing and engineering at Creative in 94, 95, one of my coworkers actually built a mod player that used the memory of the AWE32. That you had the 2 slots that you could put up to 28 megs of memory into it. I know 28 doesn't work. It's 2 16s, but it can only address 28. But he made a mod player that actually used the memory of that to play mods.
Oh, sweet.
Never released. Only us in engineering got to play with it, but it was a cool little toy for us to hang out with.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It took the demo scene dudes probably like 6 months to get a module player out that supported that exact replay mechanism on the AWE32.
Early wavetable.
Super cool.
Awesome stuff.
So we want to go back to the Tandy there, Brian, or?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just saying that, like, the only game that my friend had that really I remember recognizing this was RoboCop. We both had RoboCop on our PCs, and the DOS version, again, sounded awful the way I was playing it with PC speaker, and he had it on the Tandy 1000. That was one of the games he had that supported his specific sound. And I don't know anything about the hardware. I just know it sounded way better. And this was before any of us had sound cards. So does anybody know what the deal was with that? Why Tandy sounded so much better?
Tandy had 3 channels instead of the PC speaker's 1, yes?
That's correct. The Tandy 1000 copied its sound hardware from the IBM PC Junior, and both of them used a Texas Instruments SN76496 chip. No need to look that up. It had 3 square wave channels, so it was like 3 PC speakers instead of 1. And it also had a 4th noise channel that was either limited if you used it by itself or flexible if you tied it to one of the sound channels. So then you would have 2 sound channels and then a very flexible noise channel. And there are a lot of...
I've got the DOS version here, which is sort of me. And then I've got
actually
the Tandy.
The RoboCop game back then when I was a kid actually scared the crap out of me for one reason. The little frame at the beginning you get of RoboCop walking out of the flames.
Ah.
I don't know why. In hindsight, it seems ridiculous, but there you have it.
Hey, kids, you got an active imagination. So here's Tandy, a little more. So yeah, you've definitely got the more channels, more complex sounds.
Yeah, so as a kid, I was like, what the crap? Why does it sound so better on your computer?
My computer sucks.
Oh, it's a good thing none of your friends had an Amiga then.
No,
Oh,
I know nobody with Amiga. I don't know if it's just a Midwest thing or what, but I don't.
No,
think
it's a North American thing apparently.
I don't know
It
because
was-
I didn't know anyone with an Amiga either. I knew friends with C64s, but never Amigas.
I
Everyone
had
I knew had
never,
PCs.
ever come close to seeing an Amiga until I attended a computer club meeting with my brother.
Which is kind of strange because Amigas were extremely. You're in the north of the Netherlands, right?
South Netherlands, but yeah.
South. Okay,
I'm
sorry,
a
my bad.
I'm a European at any rate, and I had never, ever, ever seen an Amiga until that day.
Like I saw Tandy's
Strange.
everywhere because you walk by a Radio Shack and it was always in the right in the entrance, playing some little demo thing.
So yeah, but
I've
you
never
don't
seen
see
a Tandy at all.
Yeah, you don't see Tandy 1000s outside of North America, basically. Certainly not in Europe.
The reason they were so popular is because there were Radio Shacks in every mall.
Oh yeah,
and they would put exactly. So Joe knows what I'm talking about, and they'd have demos of the systems right up in front, usually a Sierra game, and they were cheap and they were compatible, and you could service them right there. So they were really popular for a very long time.
So Tandy claims that what was it? King's Quest was made by their request to show off the Tandy hardware. Is that true?
Was that the PC Junior?
No.
It was the PC Junior. So IBM contacted them and commissioned them to create a game that would fully utilize the 16-color graphics and 3-voice sound of the PC Junior. And they did, but because the PC Junior didn't sell well, that game didn't sell well, and they had put a lot of their resources into it, and they almost had a lot of financial difficulty until they ported it to the PC, and then later the Tandy 1000, which the Tandy 1000 is a clone of the PC Junior. A lot of people don't know that. That's where the actual graphics and sound come from. And it was the massive success of those two ports that got them back in the black.
Cool.
Right. So I guess we mentioned Sierra. So I think for me, that was sort of kind of the best at the time PC speaker music that I had heard, because they're very simple melodies, but they're memorable. Like everyone remembers the Space Quest 1 theme. Everyone remembers the Larry theme.
What I actually remember of Space Quest 1 the most, what was kind of a running gag with me and my family at the time, was the very first thing you hear when you start the game after, the logo and everything, is when Roger comes out of the closet and goes, bloop, bloop. And then the alarm sounds. I always love that for some reason.
No, it's great. I mean, they were definitely, I think, able to use the limited resources to, maybe not in a very creative way or in a very groundbreaking way, but they kind of took what was there and they made good, good sound, good music out of it. Like here's Space Quest 1. Everyone knows this.
Oh, definitely. But
yeah, and there's nothing to this. It's one channel, it's one melody, but it sticks with you, right?
Oh, definitely. But I found it interesting years later to use DOSBox in Tandy mode to go back to those games and listen to them with 3-channel sound.
Yeah, because it definitely sounds better with those extra 2 channels.
But not all games supported that Tandy mode, right?
Hardly.
I think pretty much every original AGI and SCI Zero game supported those.
See, my friend who had a Tandy didn't play those games, so that'd be why we never.
Yeah, it was. If it wasn't a Sierra game, it was usually something that you stumbled into. There are a couple of games that didn't advertise PC Junior or Tandy sound support, but then when you play them on that hardware, suddenly you're hit with a new soundtrack. And even now, when I do my software preservation archival stuff, occasionally I will stumble onto a game I never knew had a Tandy soundtrack, and so I'll play it for 2 hours and exhausted.
Yeah, I was actually one time a friend of mine was talking about Civilization of all things, and he was talking about one version he had never heard before or since that had different sound from what he was used to, and I actually discovered Civilization has Tandy sound support.
Cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the Tandy.
I actually personally went and tried that out in DOSBox, and it sounds pretty good.
Cool. So yeah, here's the Tandy Space Quest 1, which is, it's more fun, It's got the little bassy line thing. now I'm bobbing my head like a moron. But anyway,
We all were. Well, I was anyway.
So, well, we were talking about Sierra. I don't know if it's people ready to talk about it, but is it true that Sierra is kind of a driving force with AdLib's success?
In games, I would agree. The AdLib originally came out as a music composition system, and that's what all their marketing was. And then it was in 1988 when King's Quest IV came out, and Ken had gone to a Japanese game show and had seen all these games with wonderful music, and he came back with that, saying we need to have some sort of that initiative in our company. So King's Quest IV had AdLib support, and it had IBM. They were still dedicated to IBM for helping them get out of financial difficulties. So that's why it also supports the IBM Music Feature Card, which was a music-only card from IBM, and then of course the Roland M232. So Sierra had a big. I would say they're probably 50% of the reason that we have sound cards in gaming.
They used to do a lot of advertising and sold the AdLib directly from them.
They did. Yes.
So Tomer, did you say you wanted to talk about AdLib?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of hijack the conversation a little bit to say that when it comes to FM sound and specifically AdLib or Sound Blaster, like pre-Wavetable Sound Blaster sound, there really is only one game you should care about, and that's Dune.
I was going to say, if Anatoly was here, that's what he would say.
In that
Well, since he's not here, we're gonna gush in his place because fuck yeah, Dune is amazing.
Yeah. So
and so is that soundtrack that Tomer is holding up.
So when the game came out, the musicians there, Stefan Peek. I'm probably gonna mispronounce the name because
I think that sounds accurate.
Yeah, I don't French. Yeah, so Stefan Pick and Philipp Ulrich, which I'm assuming is German, but I don't really know, composed the soundtrack for this game, and it's one of those like masterpieces of computer game music. I have a whole bunch on my list, which I assume we may or may not get to at any point, but certainly Dune is like the example of how to take a really, really amazingly composed soundtrack that actually came out on CD along with the game and sort of translated to FM sound. And like the FM soundtrack is not inferior to the CD version at all. It's a little bit different.
They
got a bit of a different.
Their good parts, definitely, but AdLib,
amazing sound.
So would we be getting too nerdy if we ask to define what the difference is with FM and what we've been dealing with before that?
I think that's a great idea.
Sure. So fundamentally, yeah. Sorry, I'm distracted by the music.
I'll stop the music.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I understand the technicalities of it enough to bother, but fundamentally, it's about the way that sound synthesis is actually performed, FM being frequency modulation. So whereas the PC speaker was limited in frequency range and only had basically one square wave that could go on or off at a limited range of frequencies, but hypothetically at any frequency, what you would have with the OPL2 chip from Yamaha that was kind of the mainstay of PC sound in the AdLib and Sound Blaster era. What you would have is a programmable chip where there's a number of channels, and each one of these channels can produce one of a variety of waveforms. So you'd have square waves, sine waves, sawtooth waves, or saw waves as they're often called, or I don't think the AdLib actually had like a white noise generator. Jim, did it? Do you remember?
It does. Yeah, it does. But I think it can do triangle waves as well.
Oh, okay. Well, so there's a variety of waveforms you can generate, and also you can apply operators on them. So there's like the classic kind of attack, sustain, decay envelope, or the slightly more capable 4 variant one. But the bottom line is that you can just program, like beyond having several more channels to work with, you can actually program the sound card to produce much more complex sounds out of those channels. Furthermore, the AdLib had another mode by which you'd have, I think, 6 of those programmable channels, but also 5 percussion channels, which is like a different form of synthesis that's aimed to produce like drums and snares and that sort of thing. So that's kind of a shallow, not too technical overview of the whole thing. But the bottom line is what you get is musicality. You get complexity. You get variation. You can do a lot of different things with this card that you could not do with the PC speaker.
Right, we weren't hacking it anymore, kind of a thing. Before we were hacking the PC speaker to sort of make some semblance of music, and like Jim said, the AdLib was released as a card with which to make music.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, oh, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I'm pretty much done.
I was gonna say when I was a kid, I knew one guy in AdLib, another guy at a Sound Blaster, and my memory of the perception was AdLib had better sound, but the music, sorry, but the Sound Blaster had better sound effects. That is correct? Because they use practically the same hardware. I mean, there are small variations, like even to completely identical chipsets to drive the sound generation can sound a little bit different with like different clocks or clocks with more jitter or different op amps, or like there's a whole bunch of electronics that surround the actual synthesis chip. So they can sound a little bit different, but it's not like, it's not feature set. They don't sound radically different. And since Sound Blaster is essentially an AdLib, like it uses the same synthesis chip and it's compatible almost to 100%. It's essentially an AdLib with an added like sound channel, digital sound channel. I guess because he didn't have a Sound Blaster, he had a Game Blaster, and I don't know the difference. So.
Oh, I could go into that.
Oh, well, should we? Is that?
Well, the CMS is it?
Yeah. The Creative Music System. So this was actually a stopgap in between Tandy and AdLib and Sound Blaster. The Game Blaster, which was also the Creative Music System, was also marketed initially as a music-only card. And it has roughly the same timeline as the AdLib. It sounds a lot worse than the AdLib because it is not FM-based. It is essentially, remember I told you that the Tandy was like bolting 3 PC speakers together? A Game Blaster is like bolting 4 Tandys together. So it's 12 total channels of square waves that also have volume and stereo.
This all sounds like Brian's nightmare.
It's pretty much
12 PCs for your 12 Tandys, which is like 4.
It's 12 PCs.
Sounded pretty good.
12 PC speakers.
It was there are a few games that support it really well. I have in my notes here Times of Lore from Origin had some wonderful flanging effects that they would gang 2 channels together and have one frequency slightly offset so it sounded richer. Rambo 3 is in stereo. Not that anyone ever played Rambo 3. So I liked. Okay, there you go.
Very briefly.
I liked the CMS. I think that the CMS was capable of more than what people did with it. I don't think it had enough time to get decent support, and certainly when the AdLib sounded so much better and was only, I want to say, only $100 more. So the
AdLib was not just FM though, correct?
No, the AdLib was FM. The Sound Blaster was essentially an AdLib with an additional digital output channel. So if you wondered why the sound effects were better on the Sound Blaster. Say again?
Digital audio converter?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So instead of, so you could output a sampled sound directly output through one channel on the Sound Blaster. So you would have real sound effects, real tire screeching, real voices, that kind of thing. So that's likely why Brian remembers Sound Blaster sound effects sounding better.
Okay. Right, and that's where you started getting into your situations where you'd have a separate music card versus a digital audio card. So you'd have, your AdLib or later on your Roland device for music, and then maybe you'd have your Sound Blaster to play just play the digital sounds. So you'd have your full experience.
Yes.
So while you mentioned Roland now, I'm very curious about that because nobody I knew had that. Is that because it was expensive?
Yes.
Yes.
But man,
Oh, Tomer's getting up. He's probably going to pull out an MT32 out of a secret hatch in his
Joe's the
basement or
one who
something.
exposed me to that, when sharing sounds when he started using his Roland. And I was amazed how good that sound. You realize how early in the timeline.
Yeah, I have to turn my computer around, but I have my MT32 and my SC55 sitting on top of each other. Just
Wasn't that 87 that Roland MT32 came out?
It's like way over there. I don't know if you guys can see it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff unfortunately passed me by. I only ever had, a regular sound card.
Do it again.
I only
Tomer.
ever did too.
Yeah, I'd never heard.
There we go.
Roland.
There's Tomer. Everyone look at Tomer.
Can you put him on?
Uncomfortably.
There, Tomer just has to talk.
You can click on it. You can click on his portrait to enlarge it.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Tomer, it's dusty. What's going on? You got to clean that thing.
It's been. I've moved over a year ago, and I'm still taking shit out of storage. Don't ask anyway.
So does anybody know how much those cost when they first came out?
Too much.
I
Quite a
believe.
bit.
I want to say $349.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And how was that?
Like I
compared
said,
to
too
AdLib?
much.
Yeah, well, because my understanding of the MT32 is it was also one of those things that was never intended really to play audio out of a PC. So the MT I believe it means like multi-timbre 32.
Yeah.
So it has either 32 more channels or 32 more instruments or something. I think 32 more instruments. So you would plug it into your Roland, like your Roland keyboard, and it would give you more sounds, basically.
I remember seeing it as an option in a lot of games when I would configure them. A lot of games.
Oh yeah, so it became a thing.
Sierra especially basically designed all of their games around the MT32.
So the MT32 is just a standalone MIDI synth. Like you plug it in, you control it through a sequencer. It just so happens that most keyboards are also sequencers, so can control one of these things. But a PC can also do that.
So I'm an amateur when it comes to the sound. So you just said PC synth, so that's different than FM and the.
No, I said it's a standalone MIDI synthesizer.
MIDI. Sorry. So, but this MIDI is now a different tech than FM and the PC speaker tech, right?
Correct. It's a different technology, but it's also like a different thing. So FM is, in that context, a technique for generating sound. MIDI is a technique for putting information about sound from one place and getting it from one device to the next. So that information could be...
Like Jim was saying, they designed that for MIDI keyboards and all that.
Yeah, among other things. It's basically like sound synthesis equipment. So a lot of musicians actually,
digital interface.
Yes. So a lot of musicians actually used the MT32 back in the day for producing music, and not strictly like it wasn't strictly a gaming device. I don't know that it necessarily wasn't like I don't know that it wasn't thought of as one because it's relatively small compared to most kind of contemporary units, and there's a different version of it that fits in like a rack mount. So I don't know that no thought went into possibly using this as like a PC targeted kind of sound device, but it certainly is not that by design.
Right. So my suspicion is that they initially did not think of it for that purpose, and it was kind of adopted. And then if you look at kind of the Roland, product line following the MT32, they started creating, these additional devices that had, maybe it didn't have the screen, it didn't have the volume knob, and then eventually, the LA PC1 or whatever was kind of an MT32 on a card, and so they sort of embraced the fact that this
wasn't that the STC one,
or maybe it was. I can't, or maybe the LA PC1.
No,
was
you're
the,
right. The LAPC one is the MT32 on a card. Tomer is thinking of the SCC one,
which was the first sound canvas card for.
Oh,
PCs.
right.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Which
So
is
it's
the first one I had.
SC55 on a card then.
Yes,
correct.
Yes.
I'm hearing a whole bunch at once. I'm trying because this is new to me. What you guys are saying, so I'm trying to keep up.
So let me clarify to Brian. The difference between sound cards and MIDI devices is that when you put a sound card in a computer, the computer is manually driving it. It's setting the voices, it's setting the frequencies, it's turning the volume up and down on each of the voices. MIDI is different. MIDI is specifically for music composition and playback. So the only thing the computer is doing with a MIDI device is sending it notes. That's it. Note key down and how hard, and then key off, and that's it. So the standalone synthesizers do a lot of extra work the computer doesn't have to do, and they sound better.
So different synthesizers could sound differently with the same.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. They can sound nothing like each other. So that's also why some games will have ludicrously high numbers of MIDI devices for you to pick through, so that because the CM32 sounded different than the SCC1, which sounded different than the MT32, et cetera, et cetera.
So
I actually have fun with my setup here because since I only have one kind of a USB MIDI dongle thing, I have my SC55 plugged into the MIDI out, MIDI in, whatever. And then I have my MT32 daisy chain through that. So if I want to play my MT32, I have to turn on my SC55, but mute it. But sometimes in some games, it actually sounds really cool if you just leave them both on.
So there's actually a YouTube channel that I'll link to in a bit that does experiments with that sort of thing. It's called the Soundcard DB or something like that. They actually recorded things like the Dune soundtrack in its entirety on multiple devices at once, and they sort of switch between different subsets on the fly.
Yeah, like sometimes it sounds awful.
I just linked it. No, it sounds.
Cool.
I mean, obviously, it's not like something you can naively do and expect to sound even reasonable, let alone
but
good.
sometimes it creates like these really cool harmonies. Like it just makes it sound richer at times.
It's more layered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The two devices are just
cool.
Yeah, well, I guess because the SC55, which is a general MIDI module, which kind of later on, I guess, like 93 or 94 kind of a things, the general MIDI sort of became more of a standard. And
General MIDI came out in
Even
91.
earlier. One, yeah.
But I
But
guess
it became more mainstream around 93, 94.
yeah, that's sort of
I
what
would
I
agree.
mean. And so I guess the SC55 did MT32 emulation, but it didn't sound exactly the same. So yeah,
It sounded worse because the MT32 you can tweak the instrument parameters and make them sound slightly different, and a lot of Sierra games did that. So
Yes.
if you just simply put your SCC1 into MT32 mode, it could pick the correct instruments, but not accept their tweak parameters. So it always sounded a little worse.
right. And I
So
guess
if
that's
you-
why
if you've
sometimes
ever-
when you started the game, when you started your Sierra games, if you had an MT32, I even noticed this now in DOSBox, it takes a while to load up the game because it's uploading the patch bank basically to the MT32.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to say. Now, if you actually plug in an MT32, what is pretty cool is it has this little LED display in the front that has like, I think maybe 20 characters or something on it.
Yeah, it shows
And
the channels
if you actually, it can also show messages sent through the media interface. So actually, if you run a lot of different Sierra games, they actually show you messages on the MT32.
Yeah, I love
as they're
that.
uploading
That
patch
screen,
tracks.
that screen is absolutely my favorite. Aside from the sound, is my favorite thing about the MT32.
It's a wonderful Easter
Yeah,
egg.
but on DOSBox too, you can also download the ROM files and have those same messages pop up on screen.
Well,
Yes, you can.
technically you can't because it's illegal, but so let's all
Yes,
assume
you
that,
should.
that legally.
no one
I
cares
don't
otherwise.
consider it illegal if I have an MT32 in my closet.
There you go. So you're
Yeah,
good.
that is exactly what I was getting at. So you did that legally. Good for you.
Exactly.
The rest of you also do that legally because it's cool.
Yes, and honestly,
Like,
if you
you
really
can
want an
actually-
MT32, they're like,
Works.
They're
you can
cheap.
get them for you can get them like $100 or less on eBay,
Yeah.
and they are so cool. Like it's just it's so awesome
And
to.
you can find, if you're a big fan of music game, you can find a lot of the original Sierra stuff on Quest Studios.
Yep, Quest Studios.
It has all the,
Is
a
that
lot of the
still
MT32.
Oh,
No,
you went all robot-y.
Quest
I did.
Studios moved over. Somebody else took it over.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. But it's back on?
It
sorry,
has been for
Tomer,
a
you
while.
went robot-y. You're the one that's robot-y.
I did? Okay, let me shut up for a bit.
You're back now.
No, you're better
good.
now.
Okay. Anyways,
Figures.
but yeah,
What
Quest
sort of
Studios
messages
is.
were they showing on the MT32? Was it just titles of the tracks, or were they little clues for the game, or?
They generally show like the name of the game when the game started up, and when you exited the game, it might say bye or.
Or it might have like a smart ass comment, but I mean, it's not like you're not
Yeah.
expected to have that, so it can't.
I remember
do anything
in
important.
I remember in Space Quest 3 specifically, it says insert Buckazoid when you quit.
Yes, yes.
I was
that
going to
is-
say, I could see Space Quest being a little snarky about things that they would pop up.
Yeah, so it's just the cool stuff like that. It's really. And I think I can't remember. I think all the LucasArts games just said like LucasArts Entertainment or something like that. Or
Well, since we're talking about sound canvas MT32 stuff, a little fun fact: the Sound Blaster Pro, when the game started, would initialize the sound card, which would reset the mixer levels on the card. If you didn't know it, the card had a mixer on it you can mix the channels.
right, yeah.
I had a sound canvas at that time when I was working. That was when I was in tech support at Creative. And I had my sound canvas routed into my line input on my Sound Blaster. And I was playing Might and Magic 3. And I wanted music through my sound canvas, but digital audio through my Sound Blaster, which is what a lot of people did at that point, especially if they had an MT32. Unfortunately, it reset the mixer, which put the line at 0. So I ended up getting on the phone with the music guy at New World Computing. He ended up having to write a TSR that I would have to run before the game that would ignore the reset of the sound card. Jim
For the uninitiated,
Jim is nodding. Yeah, Jim is nodding because he knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, for the uninitiated, a TSR is short for Terminate and Stay Resident program. What this actually means is that back in the DOS days, if you needed like a utility program or a driver or something that would have to run but remain active, because DOS could not do more than one thing at a time. So if you could kind of do that with a TSR program. That's how a lot of like old game cracks and trainers and stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is it bad that my first TSR was a key grabber so I could get my mom's password?
Yes,
No, that
it
makes
is.
you
It makes
awesome.
and a slightly horrible person, but in a way that we all respect and love.
So, Craig, you're talking about how you went with Sound Blaster for digital audio and then, another device for your MIDI. When did that first become? Well, I guess before we do that, we should talk about the digital sound cards now, right? Sound Blaster.
Well, first, before we get off the Roland stuff, I could go post linked the Larry 5 theme on MT32, which I think which is good. I enjoy.
Well, not the theme, but one of my
Or a
favorite
song,
tracks,
yeah.
like I said.
Can you play it? Oh, yeah.
There we go. Nice. Which one's this? What part of the game is this from? I can't remember.
The Hard Disk Cafe.
Yes. Not an amazing game, Larry 5, but very good music.
Oh, definitely.
No, it's the next two that were like the pinnacle of the series.
Mm-hmm. But this, I think, was the first Larry that I actually ever played.
My first Sound Blaster could definitely not create that kind of music.
No.
Oh no, like you have to find. There's a ton of really good. I'll find one. Like they do it a lot with Wing Commander. You do the Sound Blaster versus the MT32.
No comparison.
Yeah, it's just.
Although personally, I do have a soft spot for AdLib music just because of how some certain songs do sound like what Tomer said with the Dune soundtrack. Or especially Dune 2 has some really, I'm not sure how to describe it, really dark, kind of moody tunes.
Dune 2, I felt worked a lot better with the AdLib than it ever did with the MT32.
Like, I got a song right here that illustrates really well what I mean with that. If I can just link that.
Sure.
And this song is AdLib now, right?
AdLib, yes.
Okay, too many windows. There we go. That's the one. Okay, let's copy that into the other window. I can't stream the audio through Safari that I'm running the Hangout through, because then you guys will get your audio again. So I have to have the Hangout in Safari, but run the audio through Chrome so I can, yeah.
Nice.
Anyways,
Yeah, it's complicated.
Here we go. Yeah, Dune 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That sound right there. I just love that.
Yeah, this is Frank Klepacki. He's awesome.
Frank Klepacki was a damn good composer as it was. He did, Dune 2. He did Carandia games, Command and Conquer.
Carandia, Lands of Lore.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, those had good AdLib soundtracks.
Lands of Lore I never played myself, unfortunately.
And I think if I'm not wrong, if Trolls was here, he could confirm. So if I was it last season on the SQ Historian podcast, he
actually
Ken
interviewed
Allen.
him.
So Ken Allen interviewed Frank Klepacki, which is awesome.
Oh, yeah,
These two guys that were composing music, talking to each other.
Ken interviewed Frank, but yeah.
For Trolls' podcast.
Well, so I
That
never
was
knew
pretty
the difference
awesome,
between AdLib and the Roland sound. So now I understand that one's MP3 and one's FM, right?
That's close enough. I mean, the reality of it is, it's not predominantly based on wavetable synthesis. The NT32, it does I can't recall exactly what the technique was, but it had this patented specific technique for sound generation, some linear or something. Can't recall. Anyway,
what made
linear arithmetic.
Yeah,
what
those
made
are
Sound Blaster take over. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Those are technicalities. The bottom line is that at the original Sound Blasters up until the AW32 had only FM synthesis for music or digital audio, which is kind of the next thing that we're probably going to cover.
So is Sound Blaster the first one to do true digital audio, or what made them take over, become the?
It wasn't the first at anything. It was just reasonably cheap and very well marketed and highly compatible with AdLib. So
AdLib did do digital audio, though. And I'm kind of
no.
AdLib, the AdLib Gold, I think, was the digital audio card.
Yeah,
correct.
And it was a terrible commercial failure. It's nigh impossible to get an AdLib Gold.
Oh, what do we got? We got the Renegade soundtrack.
Well,
Command and Conquer Renegade, yeah.
We were talking about Frank Klepacki.
Right.
So
he was basically
as you can see, I'm a big Frank Klepacki fan.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
he was like
So
Westwood
am I.
May, basically.
But I unfortunately don't own any of his physical albums.
Those Command and Conquer soundtracks, I really enjoyed them, and I guess that's a good segue kind of into digital audio.
Yeah.
All right. So what's
I do actually have a few of his songs in my playlist here as well. I'll just link another at random.
As long as you got to do Hell March.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of for sure.
Okay.
Why
how much
does
is-
everyone love that track? It's
Because it's just so synonymous with Command and Conquer.
that it is.
Red Alert
It's not that
specifically.
good.
Which is funny because
the
I don't
first
think
game as well had some really damn good tracks,
Yeah.
like Mechanical Man and Act on Instinct,
Yeah, or No Mercy.
No Mercy.
There is actually something I want to bring up before we go digital audio.
okay, then I'll play Hell in a little bit.
Interrupting Panda. Sorry. Anyway, no, it's actually meaningful to the discussion, I feel. So one of the kind of hidden advantages of the old style FM or general MIDI devices is because they're programmable. You basically don't have a recording of the music playing through the game engine. What you have is a set of instructions, like a music note sheet or something like that. One of the things you could do with that, which originally Lucasfilm or LucasArts put to very good use, is you can use that to kind of prearrange these strings of music that you would be able to piece together to form a cohesive whole. So you'd get basically a dynamic music system that you can adjust based on what's going on in the game. So
Right,
LucasArts
this is where
system
things-
called the
yeah.
Muse.
Yeah, iMuse, for example,
Yeah.
you have, but a lot of companies had these kind of event-based music
Not as many
systems.
as you'd think, actually, at least as far as I know. But regardless of how many, the thing is, this is not an easy technique to employ effectively. It takes a lot of creativity and effort on the part of predominantly the composer, but also the level designers, the game programmers. There's a lot of complexity involved. But it's relatively easy to do when your music is essentially a set of instructions anyway. Whereas with digital audio, I'm actually only aware of one instance in which it was the same principle was put to good effect, and that's in Tron 2.0. But we should probably come back to that when we discuss digital audio. But it's like an enabling thing that the older technologies had
Yeah.
that is really, really hard to do with modern stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing that sort of I've complained about it probably on my show. I know I've complained about it on the few times I've been on Space Game Junkie, that the like X-Wing and TIE Fighter, when those games kind of got updated through their various iterations of the original one, the special edition, the blah blah blah, and they cut over the MIDI music to digital audio. You had this amazing event-based music system that would help you play the game, because the music would change when enemy ships would show up. The music would change when your wingman was destroyed, when you'd kill someone, when you complete an objective. So you would know what was going on based on the music. And once they said, "Oh no, we have a CD now, so we can throw 30 minutes of digital audio on there too," or whatever, then you just get Star Wars music in a loop, and it was less immersive because the music was just static.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Troll saying that there's some games he didn't like because they did that, right? When they went to CD option, he didn't prefer the CD version. Is that?
Yeah,
Is that why he did not
because
prefer
you
the
can't.
CD version?
I'm sure there are games nowadays and that have event-based music with digital audio, but at the time it just wasn't possible.
Well, I remember a game on the PlayStation I was playing called Disruptor, where that was a big advertising feature. And I felt that effect when, a lot of bad guys were storming me. The music would just become super intense. And again, because I didn't understand much about audio back then, I didn't know why that was different than other games on the PlayStation. But most PlayStation games love doing that CD audio because they had all that space now.
Yeah, and
So
now these days there's a whole genre of rhythm games where what you do, like the whole point of the game is to make music effectively with your gameplay. So, but it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, I personally loved games with Redbook CD audio back in the day, just because you could listen to this music outside of the game properly.
Just get track one.
And if you don't, then you bleed.
So this is, while we're talking about CD audio and Redbook and stuff, this is something that was my first realization of the different types of music. Was I had a Sega CD, and a lot of stuff advertised the Redbook audio, but there was a specific game, Sonic CD, that certain levels did digital audio and certain levels did the CD audio. And I would actually put that CD in a regular CD player and skip track one, of course, and listen to which tracks were the CD audio tracks, and they definitely sounded better. They were, I think they may have live orchestra and stuff involved. But
there was also a huge thing about Sonic CD having different soundtracks per region as well, right?
Well, yes, exactly. There's a Japanese and American one, yeah. But what I was talking about, they actually, each level had different time zones, past, present, future, and I think and there was a bad future and a good future, so you actually had 4 versions of each level, and the good future is the one that had the best audio, if I remember correctly. That was kind of a reward for making it to that good future. And by the way, did Martin just jump on?
Yes, Martin just jumped on, so say hi, Martin.
Hey, guys.
Hey, welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we absolutely can.
Oh, man, I was busting my ass to get onto this call, and I'm so sorry I've only gotten to the tail end of it. I don't want to miss a third one in a row.
We still got some time to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hey, if you don't mind, could you catch me up on what's going on?
I think we've been kind of going through I don't know if it's intentional, but we start talking about the different kinds of audio tech from PC speaker. We talked about Tandy 1000. We talked about AdLib FM. We talked about Roland MP3, and I think we're now
MT32.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
MP3.
That's later.
Sorry.
Sigmund Freud is currently like banging on his grave from the bottom.
I think it's more of a Pavlov thing myself, but I don't know psychology.
That's very interesting because I got my girlfriend the Monkey Island Special Edition, and I gave her. She was really interested in the music. She thought it was really amazing, and I gave her a crash course of how sound cards used to work back in the old days, and she was blown away about how the different sound cards can make different sounds and make a song sound different. And then there's always a debate about which is the real version of the song because the composer used a certain sound card over someone else's client. And she was just completely fascinated by just the sound aspect.
Yeah, and I think we
Monkey Island.
sort of mentioned that in passing. I think one of us did. Is that like, so for example, from the Sierra perspective, I think the MT32 is sort of the original soundtrack, and they would kind of downsample everything from there down to the less kind of quote unquote capable. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but the less capable devices. Yeah.
No, it is. Until 90 or 91, they composed everything for MT32, and the various sound drivers would they would also put some hints into the music as to which was the melody line and which channels could possibly be dropped. And so the sound drivers for lesser cards would interpret that data and play it out.
And wasn't it Tomer was talking about some musicians were making it for the AdLib was their bass line? And
Well, I imagine a lot of them did. It's not like a thing anyone would probably admit to as such, but because it never comes up, it's not like it's shameful or anything. But I mean, where a certain piece of music was specifically composed for FM sound, it shows. So you have the Dune games as a canonical example. They sound wrong on different media. So, for instance, Dune, the first game, the Amiga version of it just sounds god awful because the Amiga has, 4-channel digital audio, but it cannot, like, there's not enough channels for kind of the complexity, and also because it was probably kind of a shoddy reimagining of the music. Whereas Dune 2 sounds god awful on the MT32 and sounds divine on a proper AdLib. So I imagine that a lot of different musicians use that as a target platform because, that's what people had.
so I know we've kind of touched on digital audio now. So I was just on the first actual sound blasters, were they only digital audio, or did they have MIDI and FM capabilities too?
They did.
Yes, the original sound blasters had FM synthesis. It was the same OPL 2 chip as the AdLib.
So that was kind of the death of the AdLib then, when the Sound Blaster became popular.
No, actually, I don't think it was still just as popular because it was what Jim said. It was $50 cheaper. So people who were on a budget and wanted music that wasn't just PC speaker ended up going with an AdLib card.
I kind of think it's sort of like the Apple versus Android, PC versus Mac. You were AdLib versus Sound Blaster. Like either you were a Sound Blaster guy or you were an AdLib guy.
I'm gonna throw this out there and say that I think what really sold the Sound Blasters more than say AdLib was Sierra Games and then Doom.
Yeah.
Doom just, when that came out, you had to have a sound card with digital audio on it because you wanted the sound effects.
So for sound effects, not music, on the AdLib, they just use the FM for the sound effects also?
Yeah,
Correct.
you just had leaps and loops, basically.
Okay.
More complex than what you could get with a PC speaker, for sure, but still.
I always thought the Sound Blaster won out because it had a cooler name.
It was a cool name, and that was right in the time when Extreme and Blaster and sounds like that were words like that were
Rad.
popular. Rad.
Yeah, I mean,
I was called it Game Rad.
And Sound Blaster also came with some pretty cool software in the box.
Yeah, good pack-ins, and it was very well marketed.
It came out with Dr. Spazo and the
Dr.
Parrot.
Spazo, exactly, and the
Dr.
Parrot.
Spazo was the best.
So what is Dr. Spazo?
Dr. Spazo is basically
come on.
Dr. Spazo is basically a program that it's a psychoanalyst with a text-to-speech engine. So it reads out these different lines, and you can type in, responses to it, and they'll try to respond to you in the best way possible. But obviously, it's pretty limited. But it was just fun to listen to this really broken, synthesized voice going, "Hello, my name
Say
is Dr.
whatever is in your
Spazo."
mind freely. Our conversation will be kept in strict confidence.
Exactly like that.
That's it. It was
Okay.
Eliza with a text-to-speech synthesizer bolted onto it.
Until
my
somebody
experience
played
of
that,
it-
I hadn't heard of it, but now you played it, I do remember that. I definitely remember hearing that.
Let's not mention the talking parrot.
Oh, the
Because I did not at the time know Eliza, and I was a bit young, so my English sucked, and it was a bit contrived for me to understand what Dr. Spazo is about. It always felt like it plays as a text adventure written by someone who's I don't know, with attention deficit disorder. It's
finally
they
have a
can't
memory.
remember what
I
said
need more
20
data.
seconds ago. It's just
Too little
what
data,
the
so
hell?
I make big.
I finally have a memory that coincides with you guys because I remember playing with that damn parrot when my dad bought a new sound card, and I was
I
like,
could never get the parrot working right. I don't know. Maybe I didn't know what it was supposed to
we
do.
just try to fuck around with that parrot all day, and it just wouldn't do anything.
So
now
the parrot was supposed to repeat what you said back to you, basically, in the parrot voice, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it repeated what it recorded back about 1.5 times faster.
Yeah, I could never once in my life did I ever get that damn parrot to work.
I blame your microphone.
Probably. I used the creative horrible stick microphone that came with my sound card.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, the stick microphone.
Hey, Jim, on the top of your monitor behind you,
Yes.
is that one of those speakers?
It is.
It had this? Oh no, I was thinking of there was a speaker that came out in around 92, 93 that had two tweeters in front and a subwoofer underneath it.
That is it. Here's the sub. Can you see it?
Oh my, yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so it's a sub under and two tweeters on top. It's the Tandy MMS 10, and the reason it's on top of my old system is because I have a Sound Blaster Pro in there, and I'm using the PC speaker headers on the Pro to connect to the speaker header on the board, and that way I can do sound programming and bleeping and blooping without annoying my family. I can turn the volume down, or I can wear headphones.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
So you've got a Sound Blaster Pro on an 8088?
Yeah, it's one of the best cards that will still work in it. I think the highest you can go in an 8088, I believe the Pro Audio Spectrum series still works in an 8-bit slot. And I think all you lose is the CD-ROM interface. I think the sound itself still works.
Huh. So it is ISA in there.
Yeah, it's an 8-bit ISA port. Sorry about the phone stuff. I'll try to mute that.
No worries.
I was wondering what that was.
So we're firmly in the digital audio now, right?
Yes.
All right.
We can
Yes,
say
so-
that. I mean, we can jump around all we want, but yeah, let's keep going chronologically.
Who wants to talk about the Gravis Ultrasound?
Apparently you.
No, I don't know anything about it.
I don't know.
I just remember how.
Gravis Ultrasound.
All of this stuff goes over my head, so I've just been letting you guys talk about it.
I see two hands up, Tomer and Jim over there.
If I speak about the Gravis, we'll be here another 3 hours. So I think Tom will talk about it.
I'll try to give
Who died
like an
and made you
executive.
trolls?
So
I'll try and give like an executive summary.
I was such a creative guy at the time, so I don't know anything about the Gravis Ultrasound.
And you're Canadian. You have no excuse.
We have everything.
Because
Tomer
no,
and I'll provide visual aid.
because Gravis is a Canadian company.
It is. I didn't even know that.
Oh, okay. Did you know ATI is a Canadian company?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
ATI and Matrox.
Yes, that's true. Okay, yeah. Okay, so quick overview of digital audio before we move to the Gravis because it's kind of appropriate. So,
And I'll put on Hell March in the background.
All right.
okay. So when it comes to digital audio, you really get basically 2 to 3 kind of types. You either get basically CD audio, which is something that we'll need to cover separately because it has like technical ramifications, or you have like one or more channels of digitally mixed audio. And by digital audio, what we mean is sampled audio. So basically you have, regardless of how you put these together, you basically have recording sounds. It might be speech, it might be recordings of musical instruments, it might be a whole orchestra, it doesn't matter. Basically, MP3s are like the most commonly used today form of digital audio. But in the context of like the 90s and certainly gaming in the 90s, there's really 3 kind of distinct forms of digital audio that it's worth talking about. The first is just PCM audio. Which is kind of what you get with your sound blasters of the day. So you get like 1 or more channels of digital audio, and it's PCM stands for pulse code modulation. You don't really care about that. The bottom line is it's recorded audio represented digitally as bits on your computer, so you can store it as like WAV files, or compress it, store it as MP3s, play it back through any sound card that has a digital to audio converter. That is like the simple form of digital audio. So most games in the 90s would have like a digital audio channel where they would play, if you play Doom, you have all the bullets going on, and you have your demons going and all that stuff. All of that is digital audio.
Don't forget the doors.
And the doors. Sort of the other kind of form digital audio tends to take is it's kind of, I don't know if it's really a distinct thing, because technically they're the same, but multi-channel tracked audio or tracked music it's worth looking at, because it kind of bears on how games sounded in the 90s. So whereas you would have in the early 90s, you'd have a lot of games featuring like FM music or music playing on the Roland MT32, and would kind of use the Sound Blaster only to sporadically play like a sound effect, and kind of that's it. That's what they did with it. What you'd have are different games that would use tracked music, kind of like sheet music played with real digital recorded samples, and mix all these together and play them back through whatever sound card you had. So the difference between these would be Doom had kind of general MIDI soundtrack playing in the background on whatever sound hardware you had at the time, and Sound Blaster based typically sound effects. Conversely, you'd have things like Star Control 2 or One Must Fall 2097 or Jazz Jackrabbit that would use on the PC tracked music and mix like multiple audio channels. Yeah, it's what is called the mod files, which originated on the Amiga. And the reason that is distinct, or at least I feel it's distinct from like what most people perceive as digital audio, is because it's technically a lot different, and it has different limitations and advantages, contrast with just sound effects or CD audio. And then, of course, you have your third thing, which is CD audio, which is just musical tracks recorded physically on your CD, that on a PC, the CD drive could receive a command to just start playing any one of these musical tracks, and it's done completely separately from like the CPU. So it frees up your computer to do just about anything that it would like, but it's very limited because it's basically an external device just playing a music track.
So that's the two downsides of CD audio is space, right? It used a lot more space on a disc.
There's a number of these. First, it used a lot of space. Second, there is a very significant lag between the command being issued to the device and the music actually starting to play. And that has to do with the physical reality of what CD-ROMs had to do in order to play music. So you couldn't just switch from one track to the next like very cleanly. You'd have this half a second or a second lag, depending on your CD drive, sometimes even more, between the game issuing the command and the music actually starting.
And that's
on
why
the other hand,
it couldn't respond to your gameplay, right?
Sorry?
That's why the CD music couldn't be dynamic. It couldn't. You couldn't easily switch to another track just because another bad guy showed up.
Yeah, that is the primary reason. The other one,
you might be able to do it, but it would be pretty awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also there's the space consideration, as you mentioned, which is that CDs typically hold 74 to 80 minutes of CD audio, CD quality audio, and that's it. So basically, you're limited to just that. And that any kind of game data that you would put on CD is just just instead of music. You have to pick.
Yeah.
You can't do both. So there's a number of
like 7 boxes out of his closet, so we should maybe see what this is all about.
Oh, me?
Yeah, so we were starting on the Gravis Ultrasound, and Jim is probably dying to show one. I'll explain why that's cool.
I have a real quick question about what you're saying about size, and you mentioned that MIDI was just instructions to play, so MIDI was the opposite of CD. It took up almost no space, right?
Yeah, like if you go right now, you can go like on Quest Studios and download a MIDI file, and it's like 20K, 10K kind of a thing.
So what makes
so what's going on the videos that Jim is showing various versions of the Gravis Ultrasound.
So what
The
makes
Gravis Ultrasound was a series of sound cards made by Canadian company Advanced Gravis. And there's a number of different variants of it, but two kind of primary ones. The thing about the Advanced Gravis or Gravis Ultrasound, as it's better known, is that it's advanced in the engineering sense. It could do a lot. So basically, it was a highly programmable chip on a sound card. It had its own memory, so you could upload samples. So, whereas with Sound Blaster, you would basically load up the sound into the system's memory and then instruct what is called the DMA controller to kind of shunt the sound from main memory into the to the sound card for replay.
Which was
the Gravis. No, it wasn't actually slow because it was a kind of a separate device on your motherboard that did that like completely asynchronously.
It had its own RAM. So once you uploaded the samples, that was it, and you did that before the game started. So what Tomer was speaking about before, sorry for interrupting, Tomer.
Go for it.
I feel like I can summarize quickly. So when you play Doom or Duke Nukem and you pick how many sounds you want to play simultaneously in the setup program, it's the CPU that's mixing all of those sound effects together. If you want to, an explosion at the same time as a bullet, at the same time as a monster yell, the CPU is mixing all that together to output through the single Sound Blaster channel. What made the Gravis Ultrasound cool, and later, to defer to Craig, the AW32 cool, is that they had RAM on the cards. You could upload your sound effects into that RAM, into that sound card RAM, and then the sound card would play the multiple channels simultaneously, completely independently from the CPU. So not only did it sound better, but it didn't steal any CPU time away from the main program.
Or memory.
Or memory, that's right. So you had a little bit more memory available. You could have a slight frame rate improvement, but the main thing is that it just simply sounded better because the CPU didn't have to cut corners trying to mix it all in real time.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that actually for CPUs of the day, because we're talking early 90s, like 93, 90, 94, 95, CPUs that were kind of popular back then were, say, 486s. As it turns out, mixing audio, especially with high quality on these CPUs, even a Pentium generally has a hard time mixing more than, say, 20 or 30 channels at most of audio together. So the more channels you have running at the same time, the harder the CPU has to work to mix all this together. And the Gravis Ultrasound could actually do 14 channels at once at like the highest CD audio, like CD quality audio, which would mean that, like 20–30% of your CPU would have to be spent just doing that, which means that the frame rate impact may not necessarily have been that,
small,
negligible. Yeah.
Right. Well, depending on how much your computer sucked.
Right. So with the ultrasound, you're really getting into the realm of having like an onboard kind of sound processor.
Yes.
Like you would have these days with a dedicated 3D card.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a good analogy.
And so is there a difference between I always remember the Gravis Ultrasound Max. Now,
so there's a number of versions of the Gravis Ultrasound. I'll let Jim probably explain because he'd remember better.
Well, I couldn't immediately find my original Gravis, or unfortunately my Max. I have some later ones, but the original Gravis Ultrasound was just that, and it allowed you to add, I believe, up to 1 megabyte of RAM on the card. Okay. Later on, they came out, and it could also record and play back regular sound. Later, they came out with a more cost-conscious card, the Ultrasound Ace, which was this one. And the Ace could have up to, I believe, 512 meg on the card. 512K on the card, and could not record, but it was lower cost, so it was a cheaper way to get into it. Mm-hmm. And then you have later ones like the
PNP.
Yeah, I think the PNP. So here's my PNP, and clones of it. I have a Viper Max in the back that I didn't drag out, and those were. Hey, the Viper Max sounded good. And they were based on a better chipset that had less limitations. You could add a lot more RAM. They were more like the AW32, where you could start adding, I think, up to 16 meg of RAM on the card. and those were mostly for Windows support. Unfortunately, by the time those more advanced cards came out, I think the need for them had diminished. We were now into the Pentium Pro, Pentium 2, 233 megahertz territory.
I think it's mostly Windows 95 that really kind of put the final nail in the coffin. So it's worth noting. It's worth noting that one of the reasons why Jim has a stack of these and that I know what they are is because the Gravis Ultrasound was kind of the favorite sound card for anyone involved in the demo scene for a variety of reasons, not the least of which the fact that it could mix a number of sounds altogether. It was perfect for Amiga-style kind of mod playback, and you could do all of that with like 0 CPU impact. So it was a great card. So and somewhat underutilized, I feel.
Yeah, it was like getting a free Amiga in your computer. You could
definitely
play audio with very little CPU, and not only that,
it was even better. It was like getting like 3 or 4 Amigas together because it could actually do more. I think it's probably like the first time PC users did not need to have like an inferiority complex to Amiga users hardware-wise. So it's a great card anyway.
So I have a question. The demo scene that you're talking about, are you talking about those programs people would make to there were like aside programs that would try to exploit as much of the power as the sound card as possible?
Yeah, programmers showing off to impress their friends. Yes, that is the demo scene we're talking about.
It's a bit of an oversimplification, but close enough. It's basically executable art on your computer.
Doing things because you can.
Drunk 16-year-old people.
I actually love watching that stuff on YouTube. The things that people can do nowadays with old computers and old sound cards is like crazy.
That's what happens.
Jim especially.
Yeah, Martin, you missed Jim's intro. He's
man.
He's the man.
I was the team leader and framework programmer for 8088 miles per hour. So just search for that, and you can find lots of information and video of the demo running. So I love that stuff too, primarily because the hardware has stayed exactly the same for 35 years, but all of our knowledge has collectively increased. So it seems like every year yet another limit is broken. So that's
amazing.
That's why I like the demo scene.
So I don't know if I'm going forward in time.
Not demo either, but also the ones that came before that, 8088.
Domination and corruption.
Corruption and domination. Yeah.
Exactly, those two.
I don't know if I'm going forward in time or back in time, but I had a friend who had a Disney sound source.
I have one.
You're going backwards in time. I was gonna mention this on the probably we're gonna have like an esoteric shit shootout later or something. Because
the Disney sound source was basically a clone of the Kovacs, right?
Yeah, well, it was a sanctioned one, I think, or a licensed one anyway. So while Jim is bringing it over,
rummaging in his closet.
I only happen to know about this stuff because I saw it on Lazy Game Reviews.
So yeah, so it's actually pretty well known in North America because it was relatively easy to find. You basically had like 2 separate devices. You had the Kovac speech thing and the Disney sound source that are not exactly the same, but are kind of compatible. And what these are, and Jim is showing it right now, is these are basically digital to analog converters that are wired directly to your parallel port. The Disney sound source also had a built-in speaker and amplifier. And what you do is you plug it into your battery. Shit, that's like a 9-volt battery.
Hardcore.
Yeah, you don't see those anymore. Anyway, you plug either device into your computer's parallel port, and what it does is through by issuing bytes, basically by writing data to the port, you can actually drive the digital to analog converter and get a rudimentary kind of 8-bit digital sound. The disadvantage is you have to program. It's a little bit similar to the PC speaker in that way. You actually had to. That's the parallel port male connector.
Jim, is that just like an RJ16 or whatever, like a phone plug?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. RJ11, I think.
Can't get it to focus.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, it is an RJ11, yes.
Yeah, RJ. I just got the number wrong.
Yeah. So
And I
anyway,
like that they realized that you might only have one parallel port, and you still might want to have a printer.
So it's a pass-through, right? You plug one end into the computer, you put the printer in the other.
Yeah, it uses different pins from the parallel port as far as I remember. But basically you have to drive the port, like you basically work the CPU real hard to kind of bang bits out the port to the digital to analog converter. So it was very CPU intensive, kind of in the same way that the PC speaker digital audio was. But obviously it gave, because it's designed for this, it actually gave way, way better results than the PC speaker ever could.
That's correct. What he said.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. I just remember I have this one friend who had a PS2 and he had a Disney sound source plugged into it, and I always thought it was the oddest thing in the world.
It might have been one of his only options. The PS2 didn't have a standard ISA bus. You couldn't put sound blasters in it unless they were micro channel
something. Yeah, MCA. Yeah, that's esoteric stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of Covox and a lot of Disney sound sources on PS2 systems.
I see that. I had no idea. I learned so much stuff doing these things, guys. You're awesome.
There was a creative card for microchannel, though. They were one of the few vendors that actually made a sound card for microchannel.
Correct, and they were ludicrously expensive, as I recall.
And they ludicrously didn't tell us tech support people when it was released until we started getting phone calls for it.
It's like, what the crap is this thing?
Well, it's got our logo on it. We must be, responsible somehow. Maybe.
So was this supported by a lot of games or just Disney games?
Oh, yeah, actually a lot of games supported.
That's a good point. So a lot of games supported Covox, and Covox was like a dumb device, and you could also build your own. There's a lot of demo scene productions that support what they call an LPT DAC, and they even included a little text file that showed you how to make your own. Here are the resistors and a little diagram to put them all together.
Yeah, that's how I built mine eventually a few years back. Because you didn't get those outside of North America almost at all.
Pretty much. The Disney sound source was very short-lived. It only had about, I want to say, an 18-month to 2-year lifespan. It was also a parallel port DAC, and it had a buffer in it which could be used to lessen the CPU impact needed. But by the time it came out, I think a lot of people were migrating away from parallel port DACs, because one of the other advantages of the Sound Blaster, even the first one, was that it supported something called DMA. And DMA is a way of just simply saying, here's my sound in memory. Could you play this for me, please? And it would go ahead and do that without any CPU intervention. Whereas, parallel port devices like these, the CPU had to send every single sample to it manually, and that impacted game performance.
I'm just surprised that Disney put their name on sound hardware. Does anybody know the history of why there was a Disney sound card?
I think they wanted to include, they had a couple of game titles, but you see just as many educational titles that support the sound source. Buena Vista Interactive was Disney's software arm, and I guess they felt that this was an area they wanted to go into.
Well, Brian, you were asking, there was all these sound devices and did a lot of games support them. Back then, you actually had a couple people who were writing drivers specifically for various sound cards for games, and then they would license the drivers to the game manufacturers. No different than how we do it in Windows now, that there's drivers for each device. And until Windows came along, you had to rely on these third-party driver writers to actually write something that could support it.
That is a bit oversimplified, because what happened was, back in the day, you did not have kind of a standardized sound programming interface. Like, you didn't know ahead of time how you're going to be doing the programming. So the driver for the sound card and kind of the software actually dealing with the audio, whether playing it, mixing it, loading files, etc., were tightly coupled. So what you would sell is not the sound driver as such. What you would typically sell is the whole sound library for your game. And one of the more kind of popular ones was by
Miles.
A Finnish guy called, well, there's Miles, but that came later. One of the earlier ones was actually DSMI by Finnish author Otto Krons. whom I've actually run into at a conference a year ago, which was really, really cool. So yeah, there was a whole market for kind of, as there is today, really. I mean, Unity can be thought of as kind of an extension of the same market, basically selling developer tools for game developers to, so they can focus on their game and not on bullshit technical stuff.
I want to give a shout out to John Ratcliffe. He also created
too.
Yeah, the audio solution was the name of his set of drivers, and so any game that ran in real mode DOS that only needed to play one sound at a time, you'll see these setup programs for it, like for Chess Master 2100, and that's the only one that comes to mind. You run the setup program, and it's got like 30 sound cards. It was crazy, and that was John Ratcliffe's the audio solution. And Tomer's right. It wasn't just you can support all these cards in your program. It was here's an easy API to do all the work for you to put sound in your program.
Well, and the two biggest names at early 90s were Radcliffe and Miles. They probably did 90% of the games out there, or provided the API for 90% of the games.
Yeah,
right. Like Tomer said, this is much more common these days. But back then, it had to have kind of a common API to do a thing. Is very revolutionary.
They even teamed up and made their products compatible with each other. Miles for the music and Radcliffe for the sound.
Cool.
So at a risk of kind of derailing this or maybe putting it on a different track, I figured that once we hit digital audio, because there's kind of a lot less technical stuff going on and a lot more just anecdotes and good music, maybe we should just do like a couple favorites each or something.
Yeah. So we already talked CNC. So we talked Hell March. What do we want to say from original Command and Conquer?
Mechanical Man, do it up.
All right, let's find some Mechanical Man.
Just do it up.
Because I guess for me, I'm pretty sure that Command and Conquer was, I think, the first digital audio game I played.
CNC thing, radio.
Well,
there's so many of them. Like
digital music or just digital in general, you mean?
Digital music. That and Mech Warrior 2. Yeah, so here we got some Mechanical Man. So I could jump a little further where it gets all crazy. Where it gets exactly the sound. There we go.
I especially remember this song because it was in the trailer for Tiberian Sun, which was included on the disc for the original CNC.
You can call it a trailer if you want, but it was more like, we're making a sequel to this game, but we don't know what it's going to look like yet. So here's some stuff.
It was entirely pre-rendered footage, which was not indicative of what Tiberian Sun actually ended up looking like. That's exactly right.
Or playing
I mean, like Command and Conquer came out in 95, and Tiberian Sun didn't come out for 4 more years.
Yeah,
and they had a trailer for it on the disc.
I mean, it's impressive that they were thinking ahead.
And between that, they still made Red Alert, which also had a trailer on the original CNC.
And I still think Red Alert is probably my favorite CNC game. I don't know.
No. It's Command and Conquer for me, the original one. Like I started out with Red Alert. Like you know my story with Red Alert.
Yeah.
But when I went back to Command and Conquer, I fell in love with it way more. The atmosphere was way better. And Tiberian Sun, I think, is better than Red Alert 2. But that's not a very popular opinion. It's not a very popular opinion at all. But
mine is even worse. I think they were all terrible.
For me, the games have a nostalgic quality to them because I often watch my brother play them, but I was terrible at them myself. So I mostly like them for the FMVs and the music, basically.
If people could just get back on FMVs and not be terrible at it.
Her Story.
Yeah.
The Bunker.
I always thought Star Trek Borg was pretty good.
Oh yeah, are you talking about the one where Q is there?
Yeah.
And
where Q is constantly making.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that's because they filmed it on the Paramount lot with the actual Voyager set, and it actually looks pretty good.
Right.
lot of
I
people-
had this like big aversion to FMV games at the time, so I missed a lot of them because I was like, "Oh, FMV! I don't want to touch this." With
They're kind of a guilty pleasure for mine, but we're getting kind of off topic there.
A lot of people have turned that into a movie on Facebook. Not Facebook, YouTube. Sorry.
Oh, cool.
You search on YouTube, you can just watch the whole plot through, where they've just taken all the scenarios and made.
It's
a
about the
movie.
length of a full episode.
But getting back on track, talking about digital audio and all,
Sorry.
I think my first game in that regard was the original Little Big Adventure, aka Relentless.
Yep.
Which I originally played with MIDI music only, and when we later upgraded to a different sound card, I think it might have been, God, I can't remember the name anymore. An audio drive. I forgot who created it.
ESS audio drive.
Yeah, exactly that one. Okay, that's when we also got for the first time CD audio, and I was blown away when I heard this track in particular, which I just linked in the chat.
All right, good, because I was trying to find one, and you did the work. Thank you, sir.
I came prepared. I made an entire playlist of songs that I wanted to reference.
Oh my.
Oh wow! Look at you.
All right, so here we go.
At the last minute, I might add.
Oh, that's okay. Oh yeah. No, I remember this. Obviously, this is wonderful. It's nice. It's very like airy and kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
Like I could see he's kicking back and having a drink this, after a tough week.
Just a very nice, immersive kind of track to ease you into the game, basically. And the sequel had its own variation on this, which was even better in my opinion. But yeah, this is good.
So for me, CD audio wise, yeah, I think I've mentioned MechWarrior 2. And so for me, MechWarrior 2 was kind of the CD that I would actually. I had so many copies of it because you'd get MechWarrior 2, like I bought it, and then I bought like a sound. I think I bought my Voodoo 1, and it came with MechWarrior 2 for Voodoo 1, and then I bought something else. I think I ended up having like 4 copies of MechWarrior 2, just because they came packed with stuff. And there's one track specifically called Arkham Bridge, which I am trying to get. I have the YouTube thing here, share thing. I'm moving to the window. And yeah, this one, my friends and I, for some reason, were very obsessed with this particular track, which you may or may not remember. And it just had to do something with like the strings. It was all like very epic and important sounding.
Yeah, this definitely does not sound the way I pictured that game would sound. I've never played MechWarrior 2, by the way.
Oh, just the music? You should go on YouTube and look up MechWarrior 2 in-game soundtrack, and they have the whole track listing there.
I barely remember MechWarrior 2, but I remember I remember playing it for the first time at my cousin's house, and I was used to Command and Conquer songs and StarCraft and like all the regular soundtracks,
kind of electronica-y sort of stuff.
And then I heard this, and it's the music kind of was scary almost.
Yeah, it's like it's very ominous, like orchestral.
Yeah, I was pretty much expecting something electronic for a game like this, and instead, yeah, it's more orchestral, I guess.
I can't remember if Mercenaries had more of a kind of rockin' sort of soundtrack, but the MechWarrior 2 and all the clan stuff was very kind of orchestral.
Well, the clans were very serious.
Right,
so
exactly.
So the music.
So it made sense, yeah, but it was just like, yeah, so this was the one where I always accidentally played track 1 and blew out my ears and then
oh my god, I just remembered. I never actually played any of the MechWarrior games, but you know what I did do? I saw the BattleTech cartoon series on TV way back in the day.
That thing is awesome.
I don't know if you can see what I screen shared.
Yep.
That's my game directory of all the game soundtracks that I own. Probably half of those I actually own on physical CD.
Oh, nice.
Whoa. Hey,
so I'm a huge collector of game soundtracks.
Me too. I don't nearly have as many physical albums as you do, but I have a shit ton of video game music myself.
I usually just get my video game music from oh man, what's it? Oh man, I'm blanking on the name. I can't believe it.
Spotify?
Napster.
No,
YouTube.
Overclocked Remix is where I get most of
Oh,
my
Yeah.
OC Remix. Yeah, for sure.
Overclock Remix is a great source for video game remixes and covers.
Yeah, so
I-
much cool stuff there.
I have about 1,000.
Although they unfortunately tend to emphasize console music a bit too much for my liking.
Well,
I
Martin's
agree.
our console representative, so.
Yeah, I mean, like if you want to get to my all-time favorite music that's not Command and Conquer, believe it or not, there's two like for Game Boy. There's a game called Final Fantasy Legend. There's three of them, but I'm going to talk about the first one. The soundtrack on that game for a Game Boy game, as a kid, I thought it was amazing. As an adult, I still find it amazing. That's the
game that was originally called Saga, right?
Right, Saga. And believe it or not, Saga has been re-released like 8 million times in Japan, but Final Fantasy Legend has never had a re-release here in America. But the music in that one, especially the Overworld theme, I just adore it. And on the Super Nintendo, a lot of people look at me weird when I bring this up, but I find that the soundtrack for Stunt Race FX is probably the best soundtrack in the entire system. And what's interesting is that the composer who made Stunt Race FX, that's his only known credit for music, period.
Really?
Yeah, I can't find a composer anywhere else outside of Stunt Race FX.
Huh.
And it's a freaking amazing soundtrack.
So here I found the Overworld theme for Final Fantasy Legend. Now remember, this is a Game Boy, right? So I don't even know what sound chip. Do we know what the sound chip in the Game Boy was? Like
I don't know what the sound chip was, but I do know the programming. I mean, this soundtrack is actually well known for game audio people, console audio people, because it was hard for them to do that. It was considered almost impossible for a Game Boy to have complex sounds when it was first came out.
Right, because it does sound quite complex for like I'd give this like NES, no problem, but Game Boy, this is pretty complicated.
That's a lost era of audio.
If you want to hear some Game Boy reverb, you should play the battle music for the Final Fantasy Legend. It's got some crazy reverb in there that they managed to pull off.
So this is like kind of back on the other side of the PC speaker kind of trying to hack it to do what it didn't need to do or it wasn't meant to do. You got the same idea here on the Game Boy.
Well, yeah, this is a lost art that we're talking about right here, is how to make sound good on limited audio. Nowadays it's whatever you can record.
Sorry, it's funny that you call it a lost art, because in actuality it's more like a newly found art. There's
very
a renaissance chiptunes
Right.
the last few years.
Now,
People are actually composing on the Game Boy.
Music's loud.
Well, and I mean, for like mainstream things, all mainstream games now, all the audio, all the soundtrack is recorded. It's not created like we're talking about here, where they had to figure out how to make the sound come out of their device. There's nothing technical about anybody producing soundtracks for current games. It's just like a soundtrack for a movie. It's just the composer
which is quite an undertaking in of its own.
Oh, correct.
No,
That's
it
what I'm
is.
saying by a lost art is back then. You somebody who could compose for audio for a movie couldn't just make audio for a Game Boy. They would be lost. Well, where's my violin section? Well, you don't have one. You've got this chip.
It's funny you should mention that, because actually it turns out that a lot of early musicians for computer games actually were practicing musicians before that, doing various things. So you have like one example, which is certainly not the most kind of well-known one. There is a gentleman called Jim Cuomo. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his last name right. He wrote the soundtrack for Defender of the Crown, among other games, especially like earlier Cinemaware games. And as it turns out, he's French by birth. He lives in Paris nowadays. And it turns out that he's a practicing jazz musician. He has like a band. He's involved in a number of things. And that's where he started off. And we're talking about like 1986 when Defender of the Crown came out. And just for bragging rights, he actually sent me a CD with versions of game music that he wrote that he redid with like actual instruments after the fact. So it's pretty cool. I guess what I'm trying to say is you'd be surprised how many professional musicians made the switch to doing video game music actually in the early days. I suppose either because of the challenge or the technical aspects or just because it paid well, maybe. I honestly don't know. But
Do you think that's what happened to Stunt Race FX? Because like if you listen to the main,
Keep going. Just playing some Defender of the Crown.
Oh, no. You need to stop that. That is not...
That's not Defender of the Crown.
Yeah, that's the new horrible
Oh, that's
remake.
that's the new one.
Now, if you want the original soundtrack on Amiga, I have it on my website with permission, actually, recorded from an Amiga. Hold on a sec, let me get you the link.
Sure.
The PC soundtrack for that particular game is actually kind of not that impressive, but that's because it was a pretty straightforward use of the PC speaker, and the original Amiga music is actually very iconic. So,
could you play the main thing, the Stunt Race FX for everybody?
Sure.
Yeah, that is such a high octane intro. It's just the main menu song, and then the songs for each of the tracks are each one's awesome. Night Ride is probably my favorite one, but
let's see what I can find here.
like, I always see like top soundtracks of all time, and I don't think Stunt Race FX ever gets any credit.
I see Easy Ride. Is that the one, or is it?
Yeah, that one might be it.
Gentlemen, I gotta go. So thanks that was fun hanging out with you guys.
That's great having you.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming. We're gonna wrap up pretty soon, but
See you, Craig.
Have a good one.
Cheers. Have a good day.
All right, so let's see. Stunt Race.
Martin, if you go to Moby Games, you can look up the composer of that. He does have a few other credits.
Oh, good, because that's Easy Ride.
Yeah.
That's the mountains.
Yeah. Here, I'll find another one.
What platform is that on? Is that the Super NES?
Nintendo.
That's SNES.
I think the music is pretty good on that because it uses the FX chip, and I think they were able to do more because it was offload. The graphics were offloaded onto the FX chip.
Well, the SNES was essentially a small wavetable card, kind of like a miniature Gravis. So, I don't know if it made the music any better, but the Super Effects did offload some graphics. The music was probably the same, unaffected though. But there's a lot of people who were talented with the Amiga and dealing with only 4 channels of wavetable. Now you get to the Super Nintendo, you've got I think either 6 or 8, and some Super Nintendo soundtracks sound really good.
Definitely.
Oh no, absolutely. I have some good favorite Super Nintendo soundtracks. Probably my favorite console music of all time is probably the Moon theme from DuckTales.
Well,
that's
yeah, that was great.
That one. So
that is a great song.
And surprisingly, I think I mentioned this over on the Discord server. I found a lullaby version of it, and it's like the only thing that calms my daughter down.
That's from the one of the composers on OC Remix had a kid, so all the other OC remixers got together and made an album where they kind of babyfied and lullabied a lot of famous video game music for his.
Yeah, it's called 8-Bit Baby. Is that the one? That's the one that I've found, at least on Spotify.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
That's adorable.
Hey, so it's getting a little late. Before we adjourn, maybe we should go around and mention 1 or 2 titles that for which the music or the sound, really made the game for us.
I think so. So how about you, Jim? You started us. So
all right, I put my foot in my mouth. Still qualifies as a DOS game, although not a lot of people think of it as one. I think that the music and the atmosphere in Fallout, the original Fallout, was outstanding.
For sure.
Yeah, just and in fact, it's so good that when you play Fallout New Vegas, which was partially done by the same people, they reused some of the music. So that was a nice surprise when I played Fallout New Vegas. And about the other one, where I feel like the music really truly helps define the steampunk nature of the game, and I think it was DOS, but I apologize if it wasn't, was Arcanum. And it was also by the same people. The soundtrack in that is all a 4-string quartet. And it not only is the music well composed, but it really fits the atmosphere of an 1880s alternate universe steampunk kind of game.
That's amazing. Very cool. How about you, Akago?
Oh, sorry, what?
So a soundtrack that's particularly notable to you, kind of your favorite PC soundtrack or Dawson pre-Windows XP gaming era soundtrack.
Oh yeah, it has to be Dawson pre-Windows XP. Well, obviously, my obvious choice would be the Neverhood, as I said, probably in my review as well. It's my favorite video game soundtrack of all time and my favorite video game of all time.
It's got a great soundtrack.
Oh, it's definitely
hilarious.
It's very wacky. It's very unusual and fits that game like a glove.
And it's memorable as heck. I can still scat to the Neverhood soundtrack any day.
Yeah, but I figured that would have been a bit too obvious of a choice. So instead, I'm gonna go with
Pinball Fantasies.
He's like, I'm looking through the list. What do we got?
That one was supposed to be one of mine. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh.
Who brought it up?
What, Pinball
Fantasy?
That was me. Sorry.
Okay, well that one's yours. I'll pick another one.
All right. How about B. Ryan?
Well, see, some of my strongest memories of audio in games were when I first got my sound card, and I was playing Commander Keen and Wolfenstein, and I went from blips and bloops to actual sound effects and actually having background music, because both those games had no background music. So in hindsight, when I go back and listen to them, they're not spectacular in any way, shape, or form, but for me, they're just memorable because that was that awakening of PC audio for me. Finally breaking free of that PC speaker. But my favorite to actually listen to now is Myst, the Myst soundtrack. I said in previous podcasts that I got mono right when I first got CD-ROM, and it came with Myst, and so I would fall asleep to playing that. So I'd actually literally fall asleep to the Myst soundtrack. And to this day now, if I want to fall asleep, I can just fire up that soundtrack.
Amazing. How about you, Martin?
Well, for PC, Command & Conquer, any of them were great, but I have to say that my runners-up would be Duke Nukem 3D and Star Fox for the Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah, Star Fox had a great soundtrack.
Oh man, there's something about the whole ensemble of the Star Fox soundtrack that really gets to me, because it has this same theme. It's like and they splice that in every single track of the game, and I love it when there's a common theme in all the same song. It's similar to what they do in the Ninja Turtle games, where you have that and then they use that catch to
trying to transition you into different.
As that setup for the rest of the song. Or sometimes they'll tease it, and then right at the end they'll
I think
slam
it's
it.
called the leitmotif.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Great, Ryan. How about you?
Yeah, I was going to say Myst, and thinking more about the sounds too than the music, but it just the sound really drives.
Very, very nice. Cool. Tomer?
Oh,
Ryan, are we done? Sorry.
Oh, am I back?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I was saying Myst, but more for the sound than. Well, I mean, the music's incredible too, but the sound really was great. It was one of my first sound card games, I think.
Right, there's a lot of atmosphere in Myst.
Yeah, a lot of the switches and the buttons and really engaging there.
And incredibly memorable.
Yeah,
yes.
definitely.
Okay,
cool.
Oh.
Oh.
Well, let Homer go. Then
You're right. You wanna go ahead? I don't know. What are we
Well,
gonna say?
I did find a different pick if you.
Sure. Well, Tomer, do yours, and then we'll do that, and then Brian had one more.
So I would have a really hard time picking like one or two games from this list, but I'll pick the ones that probably are kind of the most unique or at least do something very unusual. So my top pick would have to be once again Tron 2.0 because that game is severely underrated. It had issues, like it's not perfect gameplay wise, but it's absolutely beautiful and it plays really, really well. The music in that game is just absolutely fantastic. Let me link here.
It won an award.
This is like the end music. It's by Nathan Grigg, if I remember correctly. It not only manages to kind of bring Tron into the 21st century, it's like an updated but respectful kind of adaptation of Tron. It's also just great music, but it's also dynamic, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's dynamically strewn together throughout the game. It's just beautiful.
Oh, it's super good.
It's definitely way better than the Tron Legacy movie.
Yeah, I did not appreciate that font. Like, I don't know why so many people just loved the soundtrack for that movie. I thought it was a huge turn off compared to the earlier kind of Tron entries in the Tron franchise. Anyway, Tron 2.0, highly recommended. The second game I want to give a shout out to, I had a huge kind of dilemma trying to decide between, well, Pinball Fantasies was also on my list, but that's not even technically a PC game. That's an Amiga game. The PC just uses a mod player. I mean, the PC port is amazing. It's beautiful, but it's not a PC game. What is a PC game, though? I tried to decide between two games that did kind of the same thing differently, but very well. I ended up going with Star Control 2 because it did. It used tracker music, it used 4-channel modules, kind of in the vein of an Amiga soundtrack. But it did two things very, I think, it's unique in two ways. First of all, the music was composed by a whole bunch of people. They basically went on a BBS, said, "Oh, we have this competition for writing music to a game, and if you win, you get a small sum of money, and your music gets in the game." So a whole slew of people submitted a bunch of modules. Jim just wrote in the chat that he's probably the only person in the world who does not like the music for Star Control 2. No, see, the thing is, it's hit or miss. Like, there's a lot of different music in the game. There's like 30 tracks, I think, and they're all vastly different from one another. There's like 7 or 8 different composers, different styles, different. Like, it's a complete mess if you take it at face value. But it's if you consider the fact that they started off by inviting people to write music to the game in a fairly esoteric and very high-end format for the time, because this is 1992. Module players for PCs weren't even common in the demo scene in 1992. So this is pretty advanced stuff for its time. It could play modules on a PC speaker on a 286. It could do, it supported a whole bunch of technically impressive stuff, and it did that while actually you got to play the game, like during fight scenes. So I think between how technically impressive and early this game is, but also, to my mind, the fact that certainly not all music in that game is brilliant or even decent in some cases, but there's a lot of gems, and I would count particularly they made a lot of smart choices in assigning one out of a pool of completely random kind of music files they had to the situation in the game. So there's a lot of gems in there, and I think it did a lot of things right and very, very early.
Cool.
In case you were wondering, the runner-up would have been One Must Fall 2097, which just had
that's a good
cracker
one.
music, and it was great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, moving on.
So I could go. You had one more, and then Brian had one more, and then I think we'll have to call it a day because we're more than the 35 minutes over time on account of our technical issues at the beginning.
Yeah, okay. So I did have one less than obvious choice other than the Neverhood, and that's an obscure little FMV game, which, I mentioned before, that's kind of a guilty pleasure for me, called Brain Dead 13, which is by ReadySoft, a company that ported over a whole bunch of arcade Laserdisc games like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace and whatnot. That was one of their original games. And it's very wacky, it's very cartoony, and has a soundtrack that appropriately reflects this. And, even though, in typical FMV game fashion, you go through each scene, you have to press the right button at the right time or else you die. That sort of thing. So you repeat each scene like dozens and dozens of times before you. So you really get to remember
the music.
Yeah. Oh, but definitely the music, to me, never got old because it is a very diverse and very funny kind of soundtrack. And one of my favorite tracks is when you get to the hedge maze, which I will link right here.
Okay, let's see. Copy. Over. Second. Oh yeah. It's got like sort of a what was it? Day of the Tentacle sort of deal to it, like a little bit zany.
That's what I was thinking too when you first
started. Yeah, exactly. But, basically the entire game, you're being chased around by this Igor thing called Fritz. So I think this track especially conveys that very well, the sense of being involved in a wacky chase.
Absolutely.
While you're navigating this maze full of all these different monsters and obstacles and whatever.
Very cool. All right, Brian, so you had your favorite console title, and then we'll call
console
it a day.
games got mentioned, and when I first listed them, I didn't mention console, but absolutely by a million miles, my favorite sound and music from games is Legend of Zelda. From the first Zelda
for sure.
to the Super Nintendo. And I should say, every Zelda game, I've always loved the sound. I got the Zelda poster there. We got that from the... go ahead.
Yeah, it's a toss-up with me between Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. Like, those two soundtracks were definitely the top.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But my wife bought me tickets for my birthday last year for the Symphony of the Goddess. And it was, I got to say, I didn't fully respect, symphony music live before seeing, my absolute favorite music of all time played live in front of me, and I got emotional and literally, teared up hearing it.
Oh no, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I can't explain why hearing it live in person made me tear up, but yeah, that is absolutely my favorite music of all time, game or any other, is Zelda music. So
nice. And just to wrap it up, Ryan mentioned in chat Dr. Mario, and I really do love the Dr. Mario theme, so we gotta play that. I find the game frustrating. But yeah, the music is
and now it's gonna be stuck in my head for the next month.
My mother-in-law still plays Dr. Mario. That's the only game she plays, so I hear that soundtrack all the time.
Go on Spotify. There's this guy Brental Floss that does these themes with words, and his Dr. Mario one's hilarious. It's like, I am Dr. Mario, and I am doing things. It's like it's hilarious. But anyways, all right. So
thank you, Joe.
No problem. So that was really, really great, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. I know some folks have been watching, and there's been some chat going on, both on the YouTube page a little bit and on the Discord and all that. So let's just run through the list of you all real fast. You can tell us if there's anywhere to find you and plug anything you want to plug, and then we'll run out. So we'll go through the list again. Akago, where can we find you? And
where can you find me? I still occasionally post videos over on my YouTube channel, Akago. I stream on Twitch TV, _Akago. Haven't done so in a while, but I plan to get back to it.
Me too.
One of these days. That's pretty much all that's going on at the moment.
Cool, Brian?
Brian? I'm not really on much, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook, just Brian Haskell, and HD Brian.
Yeah.
So.
Of course, I'm on Twitter as well. I'm a Yuradakugo. Same deal.
Absolutely. Jim, I know you got a real cool place to find you.
Well, I'm not as active in Moby games as I used to be, but best place to find me is Moby Gamer on Twitter. MOBYGAMER.
Awesome. Martin?
I don't really have much of an online presence. I'm kind of in between living situations, but I do have to say that I do plan on streaming when I get my computer rig back up. But other than that, I just have to say that even though I came at the tail end of this little party, I actually learned like a lot more than I thought I was going to learn about video cards. So I'm really glad I was able to sneak in.
Awesome. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I'm just on Facebook. I'm on the Discord, but nothing to plug. Just love hearing all this kind of stuff. It was awesome.
Awesome.
You'll be for life.
And how about Tomer?
Once I mute. Well, you can find me on Tomer G on Twitter. Basically, if you can pronounce my name, you can find me. It's pretty internet unique.
Perfect.
But I don't know why you'd want to. So I don't
But
buy.
if you are interested, you could seek him out.
Yeah, if for whatever misunderstood or confused reason you wanna get in touch, you can find me on Twitter, send me an email, whatever. Pretty easy to get to.
You definitely don't have the most complicated name I've ever heard. In fact, your name is pretty easy to remember. Like Tomer, you're a guy who tomes things, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, I usually say I'm like Tom Only More, but I think that's such a bad joke that people just are insulted that I didn't put the effort to come up with something better.
That works too.
Awesome. All right, so that's that. So I guess upcoming on with the show, we have, I think there's 3 guest shows in the hopper. We've got one coming on that game that's from the book from that guy. That's it. I have no mouth and I must scream. So if you've got that's from Jenny, so she's gonna be sending me that in the next week or 2. And now that I've said it on the show, that you got to do it, Jenny. So you promised me. But anyway, so if you guys have any comments about that, send them my way. We've got another one coming on a Mind Forever Voyaging, which is great because I am not a text adventure guy. So any comments on that, that'd be great. And Trolls is going to be doing a show on one of his games that he keeps talking about on these things, Cyber Empires.
Are you sure you want to like?
Yeah, is Trolls going to be like? Is he going to be a very explicit?
Trolls is a professional podcaster. He does so much stuff.
He's professionally explicit.
I'll just put an explicit tag. No, Trolls is very nice when he comes on my show, and he doesn't swear all that much.
Yeah.
Only when he stops paying attention. These things don't count because he's drunk.
Isn't he usually like? How come these don't count?
Oh, come now, he's not that bad. Anyways, so then obviously there's my upcoming show, which I think I'll probably get to before the end of the year because I'm going to have time over the holidays to finally get the Star Trek: The Next Generation, the final Unity show out and done. So I've got a bunch of comments from you guys on that already, so we're good there. But I might even stream a bit more of it. So yeah, and now you guys get to hear what my voicemail thing sounds like. My answering machine. Okay, there we go. That's all done. Anyway, so that's great. Thanks, you guys. Amazing talk. This has been definitely, I think, one of the most technically complicated and informative of these things. And
Jim and Tomer pretty much stole the show there.
Well, that's okay because we love to learn stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
Well, I may have asked a little bit too many questions, but I definitely learned a lot.
No, that's great. That's why, like I said, I love these things to be what they are. I'm not here to direct the conversation or say, this is the hangout or this is what it's supposed to be. This is for you guys to come and hang out and have a good time. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. All right. So that's that. Thanks everyone. And I guess say bye and we'll head out. Bye.
Hey, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
I'm so happy. You guys are awesome.
Woohoo.